All right, good evening, my beauties and bees, and welcome to Cryptic Corner, our dark little area of the hive where we explore the unexplained, the supernatural, paranormal, and hidden, the mysterious, the alien, the accursed, and the forbidden. Thank you for joining me. I am your host, Miss Bumblebee, and with me, as usual, is my fantastic side chat at Live from the Hive. And you too can join us live from the Hive every Saturday morning at 9:30 Central Standard Time for a full show of different segments and different topics. So if you like what we're doing here, why don't you pop in and tell us in the live chat in real time so we can call you out by name. All right, and yeah, it's always funny, like I say, whenever I come in to start my segment, this is always blank because I just switch screens over and it takes like, I don't know, like a minute and a half to load up. So it's kind of funny. I'm sitting here talking about with me is my side chat, and you guys aren't even up there yet. Anyway, welcome to Cryptic Corner. Now, we've talked about ghost. I don't know if we've talked about ghost towns. I don't know if we particularly talked about any ghost towns. This might be the first, but we've definitely talked about ghosts, and we've talked about monsters, and even like Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. We've talked about strange, mysterious bears. Fairly recently, we talked about the bears. But some places, I don't know. We talked about UFOs. Some places have just a combination of all of it, and it's really strange, and it's I don't know what you call high strangeness, and I want to share a little case of high strangeness with you today. This is going to be the abandonment of Portlock, Alaska, and yeah, let's dive right in. This is from Roanoke Tales. This is the channel this is from. So let's hear what they have to say about the topic. Very environment or ambient.
The complete abandonment of a town is no small thing. It is generally assumed that there are natural reasons for people to just up and leave a certain area. In some ways, things like work in the area drying up can lead to a populated region's downfall. In other ways, chemical spills rendered a small area of a larger portion of a town uninhabitable, forcing out the locals. And in some other instances, a fire inadvertently started in a coal mine underneath the ground had been burning for decades, which forced the government to issue a ruling to get people out of there and destroy the way back to the town to keep out curious investigators for their own safety. All of these, even if horrendous by their very nature, are still very natural events. There is still even something more past that, stranger reasons for leaving an area. One of the strangest ones that I can think of, at least off the top of my head, which my main channel and subsequently this one are named for, is the disappearance of the Roanoke colony in North Carolina.
I don't know if I'd consider the Roanoke colony disappearance truly a mystery. It's kind of played off as a mystery, but there's an understanding sort of what had happened.
Like way back in the day, they found the word Croatoan carved into a tree outside of the settlement, and everybody was pretty much gone. But it seems like it may have really just been the name of the game back in the day. Disease could run through a settlement, destabilizing it to the point that people would have to abandon the town in order to survive. But what seems to make these even more unnatural, at least in the way of looking at them, is the lack of information, which tends to make our minds run wild with ideas and theories as to what really became of everyone. However, that's with information like in its absence. What happens if you have the information as to why people left, but it appears even stranger than what you would originally think to be a naturally occurring event? And what if this really didn't take place all that long ago? The abandonment of Portlock, Alaska is something that is incredibly disturbing because of the very idea of something.
Now there's a few different pictures of different villages. As far as I can tell, this isn't Portlock. This is a different Alaskan village. I had the name of it, but I actually found it on the map. But we'll get to the map later.
Just beyond the wood line, waiting for a local to make a misstep as it brutally rips them apart. This is something we would consider to happen like well back in the 1700s, because back then you had a bunch of new people in a completely wild area with very little separating, the animals that lurk from the peoples that live in town. With Portlock, Alaska, however, its abandonment would fully take place between the 1940s until finally the last person would leave in 1951, 1 year after being the only person left, which my man was really committed to his post office job. Good Lord.
Yeah, I was the
question is,
postmaster at state.
what was going on that was bad enough to scare an entire town of people away from their homes and livelihoods? Well, let's discuss that in today's episode over the abandonment of Portlock, Alaska. So first, a bit of history for you, because trust me, it's always relevant to know about the history of an area, because the funny thing is, typically before stories started circulating about a certain spot on the map, something was already known about it because a group of people were likely already there to begin with. And because of that, they've already experienced the state of odd occurrences and basically like, yeah, no, I'm good, and just left it or just passed a warning to their people about what could be found there. Portlock, Alaska is an area that resides in the southernmost area of the Kenai Peninsula. This area opens up Alaska to the Pacific Ocean, and in theory, had it been developed, would have been a pretty good way to get trade goods across the rest of Alaska, using this as an entry point. Due to Alaska being separated from the actual continental United States, getting...
Well, you got this arm here that's pretty good at getting stuff all the way into Anchorage without having to drop it off here and travel across land, Just thinking, because this is pretty mountainous area here. In these areas, this down here, there's not even any inroads into it. You got to fly into this peninsula. But again, we'll look at it in more detail. But you got this whole arm right here. You got to there's no roads going into here. You got to fly or hike. Homer's got roads going to Kenai and then up to Anchorage. But yeah, all of this down here, south of Seaward, is all you can only get in by plane.
Goods there, it either has to go through like some pretty staunch wilderness of Canada or be flown there directly or taken by boat. Either way, this was always kind of leaving Alaska with like an air of being untouched. It had been slower to develop than the rest of the country, and less people overall reside in the state. In fact, to try to boost people settling the land, the United States government would essentially give people a stipend for living there. But for the most part, the state itself is having difficulty.
I think they still do that as far as I know. That was a plot point to the Simpsons movie. They gave them like $10,000 to move there.
The population estimate of Alaska is around 736,556. That said, people are typically moving out of the state rather than moving into it. In fact, most Alaskans that move out tend to choose Texas to move to, and this sort of develops the idea that a specific type of person has chosen to live there. Nothing disparaging, but...
But just to make it clear, when the Portlock people left, they didn't go to Texas. They went to Port Graham and one of the native townships. Again,
probably someone who likes their privacy, likes their land, and may distrust certain organizations that preside over the land. Anyways, the people that lived there before Portlock became a town were known as the Aleut, and they were well versed in something in that area that disturbed them as well. This large, hairy, Bigfoot-type Yeti monster that they referred to as Nantinaq, or just big, hairy creature, and it would stalk the area and was a direct threat to any human that it came across. It should be noted that there is some pushback on this saying that the word had been purposely changed to fit a narrative after the concept of like Sasquatch or Bigfoot began to develop, so just keep that in mind. But that said, these people would avoid the area themselves because they weren't trying to end up 6 feet under the dirt.
Yeah, I mean, because the description, well, we'll get there, but when they describe this creature, it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to correspond with a Bigfoot-like image. It also could be a bear, a large savage bear, which,
Dirt. This respect for whatever was in the woods persisted amongst these people as they went through like storytelling for apparently like thousands of years. They also said the creature itself stayed alive for at least hundreds of years as well, which is a little odd, but if something was really out there, that might more or less suggest that maybe it's not the same creature, but something reproducing, as it had an established population, which would actually track with what other people would say that they would see. This area would not be settled by the Aleuts despite that much time having passed, possibly because of a result of this. Then in 1786, landfall would be named by a man named Nathaniel Portlock. This British ship captain's arrival officially basically started the camp in this area because it had abundant salmon, so a cannery would be established to take advantage of the natural resources. There are a few discrepancies with...
Yeah, it was the salmon canning town is basically the bottom line,
how everything happened. Some reports say that he actually went further to the north in the peninsula to Cook Inlet, and really made landfall there. But it really doesn't matter at all because the town itself would be established in 1921 when the United States Post Office opened in town. During the town's first push to develop, they would be settled by Russian Aleuts, and I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Aleuts because of the Aleutian Islands, but anyways, for a time, not much was really reported to have happened in that area prior.
And this isn't Portlock either. It's just a stock images of a ghost town, probably in Canada.
To the town's creation, except for one event in 1905.
Because Canada had a lot of boom towns, like the Yukon and stuff. That's why I know about it, because when my mom's really into Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and one of the characters is Yukon Cornelius, the North Pole prospector. Yeah, there were prospectors that lived all over these mountains, and little towns popped up to offer trade post and post office and other services that they might need. So there were these little boom towns that popped up. They popped up in California too, when it had its gold rush, and then once the mining slowed down or died out, the little towns died out too, for a lot of little towns, in the Rockies and in the Yukon and Alaska.
Likely there were a bunch of peculiar things happening, which we'll kind of go on to really discuss when it really ramped up here in a moment. But it seems like ever since the British captain arrived there, the first 120 years, nothing was really happening and everything was just kind of turning up Millhouse. Eventually, a mine would also be opened because of the discovery of chromium, and there was also gold in the area as well, and this brought in miners, but not as much as you would think. Typically, to live in this town, you had one of three jobs. Either you worked as a lumberman, cutting down trees and exporting timber, you worked as a miner, digging out chromium and gold in the ground, or you worked as a fisherman. There was really a special bonus job also, and that's when you were just a Sasquatch. As the town continued to thrive to a degree due to these small operations, it would really not attract that many people overall. In fact, there was a census conducted in the 1940s, and then subsequently again in the 1980s, that would show only around 31 people were still living there. Which is a little odd, because the 1980s, where did they come up with that information? Because of what we're going to talk about here in a moment. In 1905, the first strange event would be reported, but people had already been on edge around this time anyways, as I'm assuming based on their responses. Around this time, all of the cannery workers would begin to leave their jobs, citing that something mysterious was bothering the camp. When asked about what it was, they couldn't really give a description, but...
Could you imagine going I'm going to go work in a salmon cannery in Alaska and live in a camp? I don't know about all that. Come on now. Hello, Paul Kamish. It's good to see you. It's been a minute. I'm glad you're able to pop in and say hello. But, to pull up your stakes and go work in a cannery. I don't know if working in a cannery is bad or not. I can't imagine it smells great, but they process salmon was the main thing they were canning. That's what the fish production was in the area.
Decided that they were going to leave the area for a year before anything could happen further. They would wrap up early that year and then head out, which people had already been living in town. Apparently, the people that were there wanted them to stay, as if there were more people around, the safer they felt. This would culminate into a full-blown panic later when the miners would start up and leaving. Prior to this, those workers at the cannery would come back the following year and find that the strange interactions would still continue. These strange interactions, however, would start to take a turn for the worse around the time of the 1920s and 1930s. Around this time and into the 1940s, people would start going missing, specifically sheep hunters that would venture out into the woods.
Not these guys. These aren't the same guys that went missing. These are just the people that appear on when you look up Dall's sheep, which are the species of sheep that live in the northern Rockies and into Alaska. They actually live really far north. I think they live farther north than any other species of sheep, but they live in the mountains, and they were important. They do become an important resource, especially in the 1940s, ironically enough, when the caribou population was almost wiped out in the area from overhunting. These Dall sheep became an important replacement for the native people and the people of these small settlements as well, as a source of food. And the sheep have the bonus of having that wool. So yeah.
they just didn't show back up. This would spearhead a multitude of events, of brutal occurrences that would cause everyone to sort of just abandon the town. After hunters who entered the woods began to go missing, it was considered, probably a little strange because these
the can-do attitude. You got it, Gary. You got it. Don't forget about the sex workers and barkeepers. Yeah. I'm going to go be a sex worker at a cannery in Alaska, or at a cannery town in Alaska. Eek.
These people would have been armed, and with that, their safety should have been assured. It's possible that an interaction took place that would start the rest of the brutalizations because, let's say for argument's sake, that there was something out in the woods, they came across a hunter, and the hunter...
Humans are so arrogant. Oh, we're armed so we can defeat anything. It's like them people that regiment who tried to cross the swamp during the crocodile-infested marshes during World War II. Just because you have guns doesn't mean that you're just going to defeat all wildlife. There are things...
Hunter was scared and took a pot shot at it. He would then learn that those things that look like us are violent. Possibly something was angered to the point that it began hunting down humans in that area in order to make it safer. I mean, really, it wouldn't be that any different than what humans do. If something takes out one of our own, we tend to try to find that thing and end it to secure our own lands. This is actually also exhibited in other mammals as well. In fact, there's a story of a tiger that was wounded by a hunter after he was sent to take care of it because it was known as a man-eater. After finding it, he winged it, but it was able to escape and elude him for quite some time, until finally, the hunter was forced to call off the hunt, only for the tiger to start tracking him the whole time, waiting for him to let his guard down before ultimately showing up at his camping spot. I believe the outcome was that he actually took it out at that point, because otherwise, how would we have this story? But
I believe the outcome is actually that the tiger got him and someone found the evidence of it. Because we can tell, you don't need someone to tell you the story. This is... you don't need a eyewitness. This is the were you there kind of argument. You don't need that eyewitness. You can look at the evidence. You can look at the tiger tracks and the blood and the how long ago the guy's fire was burned and things like that. There's going to be tracks, of course, but there's going to be traces of what had happened. If you know what you're looking for, it's not that, there's a way to decipher a story from it.
The point is, animals, not just humans, appear to seek what is considered vengeance for some trespass. Anyhow, hunters began to go missing to the point that while exceedingly alarming, hearing stories about another missing person in the woods was just sort of horrifically commonplace. Things past this point would start to become even worse for the people living in this town. See, the town itself, like every other town in existence, was lived in by people who worked in the area and with their families. Why did I just take time to explain that? I have no idea. So the workers weren't really there to go out hunting or do anything along those lines, unless it was sort of for pleasure, but probably not for survival. But they still had to venture up to the mines, out to the streams, and bay for salmon. And at some point or another, they had to leave the relative safety of the small town itself. This is when people started to get got just by existing. It was known around this time that miners working the mines were having issues of their own, just like pretty much everybody else was that went in the woods. As people would show up for work and head into said mines, they would eventually need a break for the day or go eat lunch or even just had to show up in general. One such person...
He keeps alluding to strange things happening, but doesn't dive into any details about, was it sounds in the woods or something? Equipment disappearing, equipment being damaged, property being damaged, people seeing fleeting images in the wild. What are these events that are making people uneasy? I need to know.
Was nearby at Port Graham when he went off for work, and he just never came back. This will put a strain on the small mining operation because when somebody goes missing like that and there's no evidence of to where they went, this kind of starts to freak people out a little bit. These disappearances would eventually cause the miners to try to abandon the operation entirely, which the town would then go on to plead for them to remain open by some accounts. Armed guards would have to be implemented to ensure the safety, but it would ultimately close down when the town was officially abandoned. The miners would not be the only ones contending with issues. Prior to the end of Andrew Kamluck, a man by the name of Albert Petka would actually end up meeting his end, but he was able to tell what happened before taking his final breath. He states that he was out with his dogs at the time that he ran into some large hairy creature. He didn't know what it was, but he would go on to say that it was definitely not a bear at all. His dogs would reportedly attack and scare off the creature, but not before Albert had received a blow to the chest that would break ribs and injure him to the point that he was able to tell this story, but he would succumb to his wounds shortly after. While these interactions continued, hunters and fishermen had reportedly, again gone missing from earlier, would be found. Sometimes
See, this is making it sound like a Sasquatch because, I don't know, I guess a large hairy creature that wasn't a bear.
in creeks that ran through the hills. What was found was a fairly grisly sight. It was said that their limbs would be shredded and their torsos having brutal damage, while others were just completely dismembered. They would then be washed downstream further, and then some were even found in the lagoon, washed into that. This, however, appears to be more in line with the hunters that went missing over a period of time, and not some large group that got wrecked. It also should be noted that most people just went missing and were never seen again. The event that would actually cause the people to flee the town is something that appeared to literally be ripping people apart in the woods, which, while inconsistent with a human, doesn't mean that something else couldn't have been doing it, which I'll talk a little bit more about, like the natural reasons at the end of this. Luckily enough, there was a spotting that actually did not result in the mutilation of the person, and this man would go on to tell everyone what he saw. While down there at the cannery, a man named Tom Larson saw a large hairy beast on the beach, which he said was walking on 2 legs at the time. He would run back to his home to get his equalizer and then return with the creature still there. It apparently looked at him and he at it in a standoff. It then turned and walked into the woods, leaving behind the fish wheels that were completely destroyed. Bro, take the shot. Are you kidding me? See, this is kind of what bugs me.
Like if it's that seems not, because generally when you're talking about a bear even, or a tiger, a man-eater, right? You take the shot. If it's killing humans, you take the shot because it's not going to stop, right? Once like it's generally like an injured carnivore that'll do it. Like when we're talking about tigers and bears and leopards, they usually can't hunt their regular food, like ungulates and things like that. They can't keep up with them, so they find that humans are an easier target if they can, they can get us and drag us away, and we're lighter. Yeah. Well, junk shop, don't recognize it, shoot it. I mean, I'm saying if there's a large animal ripping people's limbs off in the woods, killing dozens of people, definitely take the shot. I mean, am I wrong? Grassman teleports. I don't think Grassman's ever been accused of dismembering anybody. Now, there's the Nahanni Valley, which is not too far from here. Well, I mean, relatively speaking, I say not too far from here, but it's all the way over in Canada. But where the Headless Valley, where a alleged creature is decapitates its prey. So,
in the woods that is apparently shredding people to pulp, and you have it lined up, and you basically have like it to the point that you could end this whole issue, and you just let it walk off. Of course, shock can't be ruled out, but still.
Well, man who's is he that shocked because he went back home and got his gun and came back?
Auger apparently had a run-in that could not be explained, but I'm going to explain it. And it is said that he was working on something when it looks like he got hit over the head with a piece of huge logging equipment. His name was Andrew Camluck. Apparently, this was way too large for any one man to lift, so neither he nor someone else could have been able to lift it, nor, I guess, anyone working with them, and it would take several men to lift this piece of equipment. So, he would have had several people wanting to take him out, and past that, there were way easier ways to end someone rather than using this specific piece of equipment. Then, they found them, and there was blood on the equipment itself, indicating that it had been used in some capacity to result in this guy.
So, what is the equipment that we're talking about here? Yeah, Rogue Animal is the premise to the first Jaws movie. Well, the whole Jaws series, if you want to look at it that way. But that's based on the Jersey Shore attacks, too, which I did a video about just a little bit ago, right? I covered the Jersey Shore shark attacks, didn't I? Yeah, because I had the guy in the kayak who went down the Matawan Creek and talked about it, and that will be premiering. Or did it already premiere? I'm looking. No, that's going to be on August 25th. So that's this coming Friday. So, yeah, check that out.
Guy getting bodied, and he was found 10 feet away from it, so it's not like he could have slipped and fell and hit his head and then moved 10 feet. It looked like someone had picked it up and smashed it over his head. Shortly after this happened,
I'd like to examine this crime scene. Seems like a lot of inferences are being made.
I have no idea why hunters would still be going in and attempt to hunt in the woods, but I mean, I guess the reasoning here could be because how remote the town was. It's possible that they needed to hunt in order to actually eat. As you might imagine, it's a pretty good motivator. The hunters have been tracking the moose.
If you're sick of salmon anyway, right? It's like, I want something different to eat besides salmon, so they go out into the woods to hunt.
Which, being in the southeast of the United States, we really don't have moose down here. But let me tell you about them real quick so you can get an idea of what they would have to do to bring this thing down. It is said that people that live in areas that are endemic with moose would rather meet a bear in the wilderness than a moose. The moose is the largest of the deer family, and male moose can actually stand up to 6 feet tall from hoof to shoulder, which is about 1.8 meters. On top of that, they can weigh upwards of 1,400 pounds or 635 kilograms. This thing has got an attitude to match that size as well. Moose are considered to be extremely ill-tempered, and if you happen to be near one, they will gore you and pretty much turn every bone into your body into a nice powder before walking away from you. These things, on the regular,
they're pretty savage.
Fight bears. While still being the prey of bears in the area, there have been instances where a bull moose has outright killed an attacking bear with a well-placed kick or by using its antlers. They essentially stomp down on the bears as well, rake them with the hooves, causing internal injuries and hemorrhaging, as well as use...
Yeah, servants kick the crap out of you. They got that fast ninja rabbit punches. Yeah, you don't mess with a servant, because they're bashing you with their antlers, punching you. They're like a triple threat. You don't want to take one head on.
Use antlers to spear the bear. Basically, a moose is just nothing to play with, especially since we're a lot smaller than them, and they can easily throw their weight around and turn you into a hashtag. While this group was tracking the moose, they eventually stumbled across an absolutely grisly battleground. Apparently, the area was covered in blood and fur. The moose had gotten into a confrontation with something in that area that the hunters came across a flattened spot where the moose must have been forced down. But what's more odd is there was no moose body to be found. Whatever it was had the strength to carry the moose away rather than just eating it there. Now, there are two things to know about the moose-bear relationship in terms of predation. The bear will typically choose younger moose to eat because they're less experienced and less likely to put up an effective fight. Also, the neck of a moose is relatively weak in terms of forces that would be enacted on it from, say, a bear paw swipe, which has resulted in things like decapitation or severing of the cervical spine if it lands just right. So it's actually fairly common for a bear, if it comes across a moose in the woods, it could take it out.
Well, yeah, bears don't fight big bull mooses generally, though. A bear's going to turn tail and run most of the time when it comes to a bull moose. They're just not worth the trouble. Now, something like wolves, because of the way that they hunt, wolves will run down a moose, even an adult moose. I don't know about I'm sure they would prefer not to go after the bull moose, but like if they're hungry enough, because their way of hunting is they don't confront it, they harass it and cause it to keep running until it exhausts itself and collapses, and then they can, nom nom nom, because wolves are resilient. If anything, the only thing that can long distance track something better than a wolf is us humans. So yeah, but bear will generally, if they're going to go after a moose, it's generally like a baby one or a sick one, something like that.
Dragging it away, especially not in the general vicinity, is a little more difficult for a regular bear with the larger the moose gets. But what's even more odd is the tracks that they found. These tracks did not appear to be bear tracks and actually resembled a human foot with plantigrade structuring.
Squatch tracks!
Bears also have plantigrade structuring as well, but obviously, I don't need to explain that. A human footprint definitely is a unique shape compared to a bear track. The other thing that was noted about the footprint was the size. The foot was over 18 inches in length, and because it was human-like, there were no claw marks at the end of its toes. This is largely where the idea of a Sasquatch hunting the forest at this time comes from. See, this was bad enough to make people want to leave, right? I would have probably looked...
That does sound like Sasquatch, not gonna lie. Now you've got the big footprints in there. It sounds like a Sasquatch. You know, you get your Squatch spray.
To this been like, yeah, I'm good. I'm getting out of here. But these apparently were some pretty hardy people. They would continue to stick it out even after all these events took place. But every few years, more people, specifically hunters, would continue to go missing in those woods. And then some of them would show back up in pieces in streams and lagoons. Other strange things that would have been seen in the trees in the area was that they were pulled up from the ground and then shoved back in upside down. Over time, this did cause people to sort of like leave this cursed town and head towards nearby towns that didn't have people going missing on the reg, which was probably a good move. Those that chose to stay and continue working, however, didn't believe this, or they just believed it to be a large bear. But they would report that something else was happening, like, yeah, this is actually like a threefer. This town was absolutely cursed.
Yeah, there's a lot more stuff going on than just this monster. So here we go. Here's the other reports. This is where it gets even weirder.
Two other things going on that scared the absolute hell out of people, which people then believed was an actual haunting. Cliffs resided above the town a little ways off, and occasionally at night, a woman with a pale face could be seen moving through the cliffs. She wore a long black dress, so long actually that she had to carry it as she walked along. She would let out a wail before disappearing back into the cliffside itself. Nobody appears to have gone missing specifically because of this, but I imagine looking up at night and seeing a woman out there just wailing and then vanishing, probably a little alarming for those that remained. The third thing plaguing the area also might suggest there could have been an established population of something out there related to the bigger creature. These were apparently several smaller creatures running around hunting in a pack. These things were said to be on two legs as well and would run people down given the chance. But, I mean, what in the name of all that is holy is that? They were said to be covered in hair and basically referred to as little devils. Basically make of that what you will. As time passed and more people kept missing, eventually everyone would have had enough of this. And by the way, the amount of people that went missing is like over 30.
I don't know why he showed the baboons there. That's so weird. It's like little devils and he shows baboons. Baboons aren't that bad, are they? Maybe he was trying to refer to them like as a correlation with devil monkeys, which is another topic that we haven't talked about on Cryptic Corner yet. So we still got devil monkeys to go over at some point too. Devil monkeys are Appalachian. Oh, and speaking of Chernobyl, there's the Blackbird of Chernobyl that we could talk about too. Talk about a monster that haunts a ghost town. The Blackbird of Chernobyl's a pretty weird event in itself. Pretty weird indeed.
36. The town itself had 31 people. So it would show that like one guy though, as the rest of the town like continued to flee, this guy had balls of steel. In the 1940s, after several Dall sheep hunters again went missing and their bodies were torn apart like many others in the stream, this seemed to be the final straw that
this isn't auto-generated, this text that said Dall sheep, like Dall, D-O-L-L. It's D-A-L-L. It's named after the person who identified him as a unique species.
Everyone would flee the town, never to return. However, the postmaster, or just the alpha Chad of the group, decided that he would stay in town for one more year, likely believing the people would return. He stated that a lot of strange things continued to happen in the town after its abandonment, and in 1951, he officially skipped town as well. The people that fled Portlock moved to the nearby native Alaskan villages of Nonwalk and Port Graham. The village of Nonwalk still maintains private ownership of Portlock today, and in recent years, apparently, they're thinking about re-establishing the Portlock village once again. Okay, well, good luck, guys! As of the 1990s, however, this town has officially dissolved according to the government due to nobody actually living there. To this day, you can still get out there, but you have to understand it is exceedingly remote, and you are truly on your own once you get out there. So as your lawyer, I'm required to advise you against it. So, what could this thing actually be? Well, it's clear like with most folktales and lore humanity comes up with, it could be a mixture of like actual truth, storytelling, and warnings.
I think maybe a rogue bear, but that's my opinion.
See, there were still younglings in this town because it was families as well as workers. Because of this, it's pretty clear that warnings about the forest would be commonplace. Telling your offspring to steer clear of a very real and very present danger such as moose, bears, wolves, snakes, and just the elements in general, considering that while the summer may be pretty mild, the winters are still pretty brutal there. So it would be quite advantageous for their survival if you warn them. These stories would be told to warn everybody, and then those would be passed around. Now, the thing about humans being social creatures...
I just want to clarify, though, that there are no snakes in Alaska. So, you don't have to warn your kids about snakes in Portlock, Alaska.
To trust what others say, so as a result, when someone mentions a woman on a cliffside wailing at night, all it would take is for like a cougar or a mountain lion or some sort of screech out in the darkness for the minds of people to play tricks on them and make them think that they saw something that they really didn't.
Now that's true.
Add to this the concept of people actually going missing and being
called mass hysteria is what they used to call it. Well, there's been a few cases of it that we've talked about a little bit before.
Torn apart. There are very normal situations in which this can happen. If someone was stalking the forest, which given the remoteness of the town, really they could do very little about it besides round up a posse, but if any person wanted to take out another, interference from law enforcement would be minimal, if even present at all. That may have just been like a hunting ground for someone who was
that's why you gotta they got that frontier justice that they do where the townspeople would rally against
taking out others who would then enter the forest. After doing so, a bear happens upon the carcass and proceeds to tear apart the person. If they were dumped near a stream, they would end up further downstream. Other situations can be explained, such as with the man who got hit in the chest by something, and then he recounted what happened. The reality is this damage to the chest likely did a few things. If it compromised his lungs, which it sounded like it did, the brain would become starved of oxygen. When this happens, hallucinations can begin while alive as the brain tissue begins to die off. This can cause an issue that can present in two ways. Either a hemothorax, which will fill the pleural space between the ribs and lungs, putting pressure on the lungs. This kind of fill up with blood, which causes the lungs to expand less and less the more blood that gets in between those until eventually you can't even take a breath. Or it was a full pneumothorax, which happened, which allowed air to enter the rib cage, causing the lungs.
I'm wondering if this person is they work in the medical field because they're pretty comprehensive on this guy's blow to the chest.
Collapse, preventing him from breathing. Either way, oxygen starvation was assured, and as a result, I would imagine he began to hallucinate and even possibly misremember what attacked him. It actually could have been a regular bear, but as his mind started to go, he began to explain it in bizarre ways, and that's actually incredibly common for people to do right before the inn. The man who was apparently hit with a piece of logging equipment might have possibly even been explained in a way that, it was too heavy to lift, and he was 10 feet away from the equipment when his body was found. How could this have happened? Well, it's kind of important to remember that head injuries can do very weird things to your body. If he were to, say, fall and hit his head, what a lot of people don't realize is sometimes your body will, quite literally launch itself during a subsequent seizure. It's actually been seen in soccer that a soccer player was hit in the head, and they misattribute it saying that he was internally decapitated, but that's actually wrong. He got hit, went into a seizure, which caused him to leap up and actually backpedal for a few feet, as well as behave strangely, and when he covered a certain amount of distance, he then fell to the ground, and that's when everybody realized that what just happened, and that's why they misattributed it, because people aren't really sure what a seizure is. But he's still alive to this day. So that's the point. Sometimes you don't just hit your head and fall down and it's game over. Sometimes your body will continue to move due to signals it's getting from the brain. Personally, what I believe to have happened is he likely fell or tripped over a rock, hit his head hard enough to cause bleeding and the blood on the equipment, and had his muscles seized, causing him to be found a ways from the actual equipment, which may have seemed like an impossible distance, but it really wasn't. As for bringing down the moose and carrying it away as well as the tracks, I would like to bring something up. Alaska has a man-eater of a bear known as a polar bear. These bears are absolute behemoths. In fact, sometimes they say they can stand like 10 to 12 feet tall. I think I mentioned it in my last video, but essentially these types of bears, when they encounter man, well, they can pick you up, a literal full-grown man, by the chest and carry them away like a dog does to a puppy. They're notoriously difficult to bring down, and given like a quarter of a chance, they will rip you limb from limb. Polar bears are also...
Why are you talking about polar bears when we're talking about the Kenai Peninsula? This is like saying that polar bears do not live anywhere close to this part of Alaska. Like not even. This is way too far south for polar bears. Hundreds of miles beyond the polar bear's range. So to say Alaska has polar bears, finding a polar bear in the Kenai Peninsula would be like finding a jaguar in Florida. It just doesn't happen, at least not in modern times. Maybe, and I don't think even that far back, you'd have to go back hundreds of years to see polar bears. And even then, they would be out on sea ice, not stalking the forest. Yeah. Yeah, we talked about polar bears just last week, or the week before. where we talked about the hybrid bears.
Unfortunately, very curious of humans, and as a result, they are not afraid of the noises that we make, nor our intimidation tactics that might work on other bears. Remember, that's like an important saying: if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. If it's white, good night. This is likely due to the environment that they live in which prey is...
Yeah, but they don't live in the Kenai Peninsula. Yeah, maybe it was you know what? Maybe it was a Siberian tiger. Because they live just as close.
just going to come along every day. So when they find something, they need to take it out right then in order to eat. With all that said, though, this doesn't really match the description given by those in the area who saw the creature. They always said it was sort of like a brown, shaggy fur.
It's almost like there were brown bears that live in that area. Yeah, brown bears definitely live in the Kenai Peninsula, right? And Kodiak Island's like just around the corner. Like a short swim away is Kodiak Island. So, yeah, as far as polar bears, though, you're way out of range. It's just not going to happen.
Well, there is another type of bear, as of late, that we've actually seen mate with polar bears due to overlapping territories. In Alaska, another bear known as the Kodiak bear, and also brown bears that are in the area, they're quite plentiful. Sometimes these bears will actually run into polar bears and create young with a combination of two traits. This could very possibly result in a polar bear-sized brown bear that lacks the white hair.
But that would still happen in much further north. These is where this is happening. This is southern Alaska. This is close to like British Columbia. This is not up near the Arctic Circle where growler bears are found, where polar bears and grizzly bears meet.
Bears also tend to stand up on their hind legs a lot, and you know what they're probably going to be attracted to? I'll give you a second. Fish wheels. To get salmon. They also would not be opposed to eating humans as they carry the polar bear genes. To me, these creatures seem like they could just be possibly the offspring of a polar bear and a brown bear mating. The problem arose when something very natural started tearing people apart and carrying away moose. Then when the tracks were found, they thought it to be a human, but bear tracks actually look somewhat like human footprints as well, and if you're looking at an 18-inch, which this was 18 inches in length footprint, you're not gonna think, oh my god, this is a bear track. You're gonna be like, this is a giant human foot. So it's not too far-fetched when you realize, like, also the average polar bear foot can be 12 inches long with outliers being larger. And then take into consideration sometimes...
Again, a polar bear is ridiculous. To claim it's a polar bear, or that it could have even the possibility of a polar bear, yeah. Maybe it's a Siberian tiger. Maybe it's a alligator. What are you talking about? Polar bears do not live here. Just because Alaska is huge, right? Alaska is a massive state. It's like you can fit like two or three Texases in Alaska. It's monstrous. And because something lives in northern Alaska does not mean it lives down in southern Alaska by the Aleutian Islands.
Combining two species that can mate, such as like a lion and a tiger, that produces a subspecies that can be much larger than both parents. And also, they say 18 inches, but did they have like a ruler on them at that specific point in time? Like, how do they actually measure it? Because if you had a polar bear mixed with a Kodiak bear, you know, sometimes larger polar bears have had like 14, 15-inch feet. So you kind of start to see how this thing might have been able to carry off a moose on its own. So when people go missing,
But polar bears do not live in southern Alaska, sir. I'm not going to say it again. You just stop it right there with this polar bear nonsense. Or even a hybrid polar bear. Hybrid brown bear and polar bear. No, not in this range. Not going to happen.
Rumors and fear began to take hold of the people still residing in town. Once that happened, it was only fueled by, you know, weird but natural events taking place regarding some people not showing back up after they left for work, or someone hitting their head on logging equipment. However, I don't believe these people were wrong to flee the area. If there is a hybridized bear walking around and already had a taste for human flesh at this point,
or just a regular bear that's got a taste for human flesh, doesn't have to be hybrid.
It's only a matter of time before it got brave enough to approach a human town. Potentially, I believe humanity should have done what we always do. Organize a hunt for the creature, but approach it without the superstition and realize it for what it is, a really big animal. The extra things to me just kind of seem to be the consequences of being afraid. People talk and Then people's minds begin to play tricks on them. The only thing that is known with certainty about this entire event is that the people of this town saw fit to abandon their livelihoods to seek safety elsewhere. And this means that they were in fact scared enough and took this as a real threat to themselves. Whether it was a large bear or something else to inspire that much fear means that something really was going on, whether the far-flung future people like us believe it or not.
Yeah, I
But I want to hear what you guys think, because
I don't doubt there was something going on. I think your theory is just as far-fetched as the Bigfoot theory, though. Talking about a hybrid bear of a species that lives hundreds and hundreds of miles away. You know, it just doesn't make sense.
let's be honest, the haunting, the Bigfoot, the gremlins running around in packs, it kind of just seems odd that all of these things were happening at once. But the other side of that is,
maybe it was a Scooby-Doo thing and somebody was doing all this stuff to try to run people off of the town so they could have all the chromium for themselves. Speaking of, let's have a look at that town. Or what used to be the town. Alright, so here, let me close this. We don't need this. Alright, so here's Alaska, right? The range of polar bears is up along here, right? Polar bears don't come anywhere near this. They don't come anywhere near this at all. Like a polar bear outside of like Fairbanks is going to be like, whoa, a polar bear outside of Fairbanks, that's amazing. But way down here, no. This is not polar bear habitat at all. And you can look that up, actually. Why don't I demonstrate that for you? Hold on just a moment. Polar bear range. There we go. I should have had this prepared as well. I'm sorry about that. But here we go. That's a good map. Now maybe. Let me see. Or is it going to be tiny? It's going to be tiny. Hold on. I got to find a big enough one to show you guys. Here we go. Yeah, that'll work. Here we go. So that's the polar bear's range, right? See, up here? And, I mean, they do range more south when we get over to the Hudson Bay area, but they're not in southern Alaska. Like, literally, when you look at this map, they're like, they're not even below, what's this peninsula here? Yeah, they're not even below Beringia. This right here, Beringia, which is this and this. That used to be the land bridge, by the way. Used to come across here. All this right here used to be above water, and that's where the interchange happens. But when you go way down here, this is the area we're looking at. There's Nenwalak. That's the village that's still there. It's just a tiny village. None of this has street view, by the way. Obviously, we're way out of range for street view. The closest you can get on street view would be, I think, up in Homer, maybe. Yeah, up in here in Homer. There's some single spots where you can see some stuff. This is the one of the nearby villages. Look at this wooden plank bridge. Very pretty landscape in this region. Quite beautiful. This is on the same peninsula there. So this is Soldovia village, and then you got Nanowak and Port Graham. Don't think Port Graham has any places we can drop into. No, but you can kind of see how these little towns are set up. Now the Portlock gives us this location, but there doesn't seem to be any remains or anything. They talk about abandoned houses and stuff, but I've been all along the where, see, it's Port Chatham here. I've been all along this coast, and I can't seem to find any any ruins of the town anywhere. Now I did find the chrome mine, right? Chrome Bay, right here. So I don't Clam Cove. I don't know for sure. Like if you type in the directions, it takes you to here. But I don't know if that's really where the village is, because there doesn't seem to be any remains of anything there. Now this is all montane down here and untamed, and all of this up through here is kind of untamed too. They gotta hug the coast. That's why I don't see. He was talking about the benefit of this being a port town to get things into Alaska, but you'd get into Alaska and then have to haul it all up here across land, when you could just take the Cook Inlet here, right, and go all the way to Anchorage, which is the big city, right? So I just don't see the point. I wouldn't see the point in that, and unloading way down here when you got the whole Cook Inlet right there to utilize. But I did find something of a lagoon, so maybe because they talk about a lagoon. I believe this is a lagoon here. I wonder if it wasn't on this peninsula here, because Alaska, they like to build on. I mean, yeah, we look at the way the rest of these villages are built. They build them out on the coast. This is the closest airstrip. So you could fly into here, and then you'd have to hike all the way down to here. So that's a long hike. You could hike out. You could hike out from here. I guess you could hike out from Port Graham, and it looks like there is a hiking trail. Look at that, going right along there, and then kind of veers off to the east. It doesn't take it. It doesn't take you back into this area. Doesn't take you into the realm of the Nanatuak, or whatever they called it, the monster, Nantanak. Yeah, Nantanak is the name of it. Sorry for mispronouncing it. But yeah. All right, so that's where the Portlock is, and that's where allegedly this stuff took place. So what do you guys think? Was it a bear? Was it a Sasquatch? Something else completely? Is this land cursed? Is it haunted? What do you think? Tell me in the comments down below. But this has been Cryptic Corner. Please remember to be kind, take care, and we will see you next time.